Hello everyone and welcome to Medicated Housewife DIY, where crafting and mental health come together. My name is Sarah. In today's DIY video, Jenga Block Fall Decor DIY, perfect for autumn. Easy Dollar Tree Farmhouse Tumbling Tower Block DIY, we are making quick and easy Dollar Tree Jenga Block Fall Decor DIYs. A beautiful tumbling tower block fall decor pedestal bowl and some adorable mini fall corn husks to fill it with. Farmhouse, rustic, and gorgeous. So quick, so easy, and so much fun. You won't want to miss this one. You're gonna love them, so stick around and let's go make some stuff and jump right into this. To begin with, I'm using this plastic bowl from a set of bowls at Dollar Tree as a template, and I've covered the outside of the bowl with plastic wrap to keep the blocks from sticking to it. And I'm also using about a box and a half of the 72-pack tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I align the bowl with the blocks that are on their sides to make a full circle, and just leaving a small space between the blocks, but not too much. You may use more or less blocks than this depending on the bowl that you're using. Once my first row of blocks are placed, I'm using Titebond Quick and Thick wood glue, and I will link that for you in the description box below. I'm going to glue the second row of blocks on top of the first, and I'm placing each block in between the two blocks that are beneath it. Just like you could see me doing here, I'm going to glue the whole second row down before continuing on. On the third row, I place the blocks the same way in between the blocks that are below it, and I'm also placing them slightly inward toward my template bowl. You're going to find that you may need to shorten a block here or there to fit into the available space as you go, since the bowl needs to curve inward to form an actual bowl shape. So in this case, I use a pencil to mark the point where I need to trim that last block. And I'm using my handy dandy miter shears to cut this last block to size. I will link the miter shears that I use for you in the description box below. The fourth row is where we are starting to really curve the blocks on an angle inward so that they're almost resting on our template bowl. We are going to use enough glue to make sure that those blocks have the stability that they need to stay in place on an angle like that. We're also using less and less blocks as we get to more of a curved bowl-like shape. This fourth row also needed a block trim, so I used the same method as before, marking the spot with a pencil where I needed to cut that last block and then trimming it to size with my miter shears. And that's before gluing that smaller block in place. The fifth row is going to be the final row for this part of the bowl, and you'll see why later. But because we are using even less blocks on this smaller row, we end up trimming two of the blocks to make everything fit. And this is so we can keep placing the blocks in the middle of the two blocks beneath them, so that we can keep a brick kind of a pattern and not end up with our blocks just glued one directly on top of the other. Now, hopefully that makes sense to you. We just want to make sure we keep a pattern going as much as possible and don't just have straight columns of blocks on top of one another, if that makes any sense. While this top part of the bowl is drying, I grab this tall plastic cup from a set of cups at the Dollar Tree, and I peel the label off the bottom. We're going to use this as a pedestal part of our pedestal bowl. This will make sure that our bowl is really, really stable. So starting at the bottom of the cup and keeping it standing up, we start our first row of blocks glued flat against the cup and standing up vertically. Now, by starting at the bottom of the cup like this, we can ensure that we are keeping that row straight so that that cup will continue to stand up, even though technically this cup will be upside down when we use it as a pedestal. And I glue the blocks right next to each other, but in order to make them fit nicely, at the end I do have to space them out just a little bit to avoid having to trim any blocks and making them thinner. I want all my blocks intact for this pedestal, so I just slide them over a little bit all around just to space them all evenly. The second row on our pedestal, the blocks are glued above the first row. In between the blocks beneath it, we're still trying to continue that brick type pattern, still spacing them out to fit evenly as necessary. Our third row starts out the same as rows 1 and 2, but because cups are not straight up and down, at some point we do start to lose our brick pattern, and some of the blocks appear to be pretty close to being directly above the block beneath it instead of in between the two blocks beneath it. This kind of can't be helped. And you know what? It's not that big a deal, and it doesn't really change the final look of our project. So don't sweat the small stuff, just go with it. I realized the easiest way to close up the bottom of my bowl was to cover it, so I grabbed this thick wood circle from Dollar Tree and removed the label, just wanting to make sure it was the right size to fit the bottom of this bowl. I decided to paint all the pieces of the bowl before assembling it together, and I'm using Folk Art Antique Wax. I will link it for you below. I begin with painting the wood circle, and I also use a baby wipe to wipe off any of the excess color. I paint both sides and the outside edge, since all of that is going to be visible on my bowl. Then I move on to the pedestal part of the bowl. I start with painting the bottom edges of the blocks and then the front of the first row, and then making sure to get the color on the sides of the blocks as well as any of the gaps that are in between the blocks. And that's to camouflage them and to make sure the whole thing has a really cohesive look. I do one row at a time, ensuring complete and full coverage. Again, using a baby wipe to rub away any excess color because I still want that wood grain to come through. Then I move on to my currently bottomless bowl, and I paint the outside of the bowl first, taking care to get all of those edges on each of those blocks. Then I move on and do the same on the inside of my bottomless bowl. Once my paint is dried, I still have that ugly gray empty space left over at the top, or actually the bottom of the pedestal. It's not big enough for another row of blocks, so I decided to cover it with some Dollar Tree Nautical rope instead. And I'm using some hot glue. I wrap that leftover space with the Nautical rope, using dabs of glue to secure it. Also, because it's not a large space, instead of continuously wrapping the rope around, I do stop and cut the rope at the end of each row and then glue it down and start a new row. I only needed 3 rows to cover up all of that gray. Then it was time to attach the wood circle to the bottom of my bowl. I'm using some more quick and thick wood glue to attach them to one another. I grabbed the pedestal and off camera gave it a light sanding with my Dollar Tree sanding block. I'm using apple barrel acrylic paint in the color khaki, which is a warm beigey kind of color, and I use a rough dry brush and sparingly rough brush the paint over the pedestal, starting with the edges of the blocks and then making my way to the middle of the blocks. I want to give the wood a distressed and worn appearance, like it's been around for years and years. I don't want to use a stark white for this because the beige color is so much warmer, and in my opinion, it gives a much more authentic, distressed look. I then do the same distressing technique to the bowl, both on the outside and then the inside. And off camera, I attach the pedestal to the bottom of the bowl using some wood glue. While everything dries, I got these small 10mm wood beads from Amazon, and I will link them for you below. I grabbed a handful of them and soaked them in a cup of very strong instant coffee, just swirling them around for a couple of minutes before removing them from the coffee and using a paper towel to dry them off. Then I placed the stained beads in a bowl and added a handful of natural unstained beads to make a nice mixture of both colors. I had this very thin copper beading wire in my stash, but I will find something comparable to that to link for you below. I cut 2 sets of wires. 2 sets of 5, made a loop at the end of them, and then beaded random mixtures of the stained and unstained beads. And I used 14 beads total on each of the wires so that I was left with 2 sets of 5 or 10 beaded wires. I took the end of one of the wires and stuck it through the first bead to secure the beads in place, and then did the same thing on the other end of that wire, making sure my beads were tightly strung together in between the two ends and that they weren't going to go anywhere. I left some slack of wire on both ends, and I did this on all 10 beaded wires. Then I separated them into 2 groups of 5. I take 2 of the wires and twist the 2 top wires together to attach them. Then I grab the 3rd wire and attach that at the top as well, followed by the 4th and the 5th beaded wire. Then I secure those 5 wires together at the bottom by twisting the 5 wires together tightly. So I am then left with 2 of these bunches of 5 beaded wires. I had a spool of this paper raffia from Amazon that I have had forever, and I'll link it for you below. And when you unravel this raffia, you get this very thin corn husk-like tan paper. I had a bunch of cut pieces, and I thought if I glue them together, I would have what looks like a corn husk. So using very small dots of hot glue, I attach several of these raffia pieces together. I do that twice, so I end up with 2 sheets of this corn husk paper. Then I place my beaded wire bunch into the middle of the paper and use some of the extra end wires to wrap the top and bottom edges of the paper to attach them to the bead bunches. And after assembling the second bead bunch and the raffia, I cut a couple of pieces of the still rolled raffia and tie some knots around the top and then around the bottom of my 2 new mini corn cobs. And this is how my Jenga Block Fall Decor Pedestal Bowl and mini corn cobs turned out. Well, first of all, how cute are these corn cobs? I think those are so adorable and so autumn. I feel like I should turn around and see a scarecrow. They are very fall and oh so cute, not to mention easy and quick. I really like this Jenga block or tumbling tower block pedestal bowl. I especially love the way the distressed paint finish turned out. I think it's very rustic, but farmhouse and quaint as well. I think it's a really interesting shape for a bowl. I like the added detail of the nautical rope at the bottom. Plus, it looks amazing holding all of this beautiful fall accessory decor. But full disclosure, my husband, Mr. Medicated, was quick to tell me it reminded him of the Stanley Cup. Oh well, but I want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments if you love this Jenga Block Fall Decor Pedestal Bowl or if it says hockey trophy to you. Also, let me know what you think of these cute little corn cobs, or would you call them husks? I don't know. Let me know that too. I am just chock full of questions today. I hope you enjoyed this Medicated Housewife DIY, and if you did, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing. It really helps out my channel. Once again, I really appreciate you watching, and a very big thank you to my subscribers. I am so glad that all of you are here. Until next time, I'm the Medicated Housewife, and crafting is my medication.